Are you a winner? Do you think like a winner? Winners love to solve problems. They see challenges as opportunities to improve and to change things for the better. The world needs more winners. People to stand up and say, I accept that challenge. I'll be the change. I'll solve that problem. Well, you're a winner already, and that's why you decided to take this course. You've got the attitude that can change the world. Your glass is half full. Now you just need some simple steps to help you consistently tackle problems, think critically, and create lasting solutions. I'm Diane Davidson, and I'm excited to share with you a model for solving problems more effectively and with more consistency, both individually and with others. This is the course overview for our 3-week program. This is the process we will use to accelerate your learning. I'll explain the skill, concept, or idea. It'll be very easy to understand. Then I'll provide practical examples for you, including how to apply your skills individually, working with others, and organizationally. Then you will be challenged with a real live problem of your own choosing that you'd like to use to practice your skills. By the end of this course, you will have viable solutions to some of your right now existing problems. We all experience problems on a daily basis, both personally and professionally. And most of us have had to solve enough of our own personal problems in our life to be problem-solving wizards. And in our professional lives, whether it's inefficient processes, differing opinions, or rapid change, we need to be able to work with others to come up with long-lasting solutions. In this first session, you will learn a 7-step process for solving any problem, large or small, in a creative and collaborative way. You'll learn tactics that will help you solve problems more effectively so you can reduce the recurrence of problems that seem to come up over and over again. In other words, instead of putting a bandage on the problem, only to have it happen again, we'll learn how to cure problems once and for all. Just to get us started, I'd like for you to think about something negative that happened in your life. It can be personal or work-related memory, but it has to be true. Then think about some of the specific challenges and the subsequent consequences as a result of that problem in your life. So for example, early in my career, I worked for a really great organization who invested in me and my development. I learned a lot of leadership programs. I worked with great people, and I think I had the best boss I've ever had. And the problem, or the negative thing that happened, is that we all got notice that our company had been purchased by another company, and part of the organization was going to be shut down. So we showed up at the front door one day and we looked at a list, and if our name was on the list, that was it. We were terminated, and my whole department had been laid off. So obviously that was a bad situation. No money, no job, don't know what to do. I was really going to miss the people I worked with, and I thought, that development is cut off. So all right, so that's the bad thing that happened to me. Now, as you think about that same problem, think about the experience again, and this time focus on only the positive aspects of it. In other words, take time to explore the silver lining of that bad experience. So if I think about my experience, wow, I learned so much. I developed my leadership skills. I got certifications and tons of experience, and developed really great relationships that I still have today. And after the layoff, oddly enough, one of the division heads called me and asked me if I would consult back and continue to do some training. So that was really the launch of my consulting career, and I've been training and instructing and coaching for the last 20 years. So if I think back on it, it could have been one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. So the first thing we need to do is recognize that problems are opportunities, and oftentimes they do launch us into new situations that are even better. or they give us an opportunity to make some improvements. So the question is, why do so many problems happen and why do they keep coming up over and over again, never to get really solved? Let's make a list of some of the common problems that you're facing right now. And these are problems that perhaps you're going to want to use as an example as you learn this model. Let's face it though, some of the problems that we have are not really within our sphere of influence. We'll leave those for now and focus on problems over which we might have some control or influence. So some of the problems that I'm hearing these days are little quality time, communication, unclear goals and expectations. I've got a supervisor that doesn't follow up with me enough, or I have a micromanaging supervisor. It's all over me. There's a lack of accountability among our teams, differences of opinions, silos within the organization, people working remotely, scared to go into the office. So I'd like for you to, again, pause and list some of the common problems that you're having over which you have control. For example, one of the problems that I had was that I had a boss who hired a person to help me out with my training. And I had usually been doing all the training myself. I'd been doing all the table setup and AV and flip charts, the whole thing. Now this new person was going to do all my setups for me. And so I could just show up and train. So the idea was that, we'd be able to do more training. So I showed her how to do everything, and I thought that would be it. I thought she'd pick it up. Well, it didn't go so great. It was a complete disaster. I mean, everywhere I went, nothing was set up the way it needed to be set up. So I explained again and again, and it just wasn't working. The problem continued, and I couldn't figure it out. All right, so go ahead and write down what are some of the problems you're experiencing right now. All right, good. So we've got a list that we can take a look at later and see how we can use some of these problems as we apply our learning. In this lesson, we're going to talk about why we have so many problems that don't seem to get solved, and we're going to learn and actually memorize the 7-step problem-solving model. So why do problems occur? Change, people disagree, understaffed, we don't have the tools we need to do our job. And when do problems happen? Well, they happen every day. They happen when goals aren't clear. They happen when people aren't aligned. They happen when expectations aren't clear, when there's miscommunication, when people disagree. We all hear things differently. In fact, I've been to meetings before where I walk out of the meeting thinking I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And when I talk with a colleague, they saw it completely differently. It's like, wow. So why do problems resurface and why? Probably because they're not solved very well to begin with. They're not eliminated. The solution wasn't a complete fix. It was a quick fix. Someone came up with an idea. We said, that sounds good. Let's go with it. And then it didn't work. So typically, how do people respond when a problem occurs? Well, I kind of like to apply the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross model here, stages of grief. There's an acronym for it, DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. So when there's a problem, we do experience some grief. We experience the loss of the old way. We experience the loss of how things were running smoothly, and now we've got this problem. So one of the first things that happen is we immobilize and just flat out go into denial. I mean, haven't you heard that before? What problem? There's no problem. That's not a problem. Then when it hits you what the problem really is, you get angry about it. I can't believe that happened. This is ridiculous. It's messing everything up. Then bargaining is a really good one. This is where we think we're problem solving, where we look for workarounds. We try to look for things that we could do that might just get us through. Then it hits us that this is a really big issue. So depression sets in, and we get sad and feel bad for ourselves and get a little self-absorbed. We start blaming others, and then we move into apathy. Then we finally get to acceptance. And when we finally accept that the problem actually exists, that's when we can start to solve the problem. Another way that I think people approach problems is they'll approach it as, I'm going to point out the problem and then I want you to fix it. And another way that people look at problems is they don't want to look at the problem too much, they just want to go for a quick solution. So we actually need both. We need to be able to take a look at the problem, really analyze it, think critically about it, ask really great questions about it, and then we move to solving that problem. So we're going to dive into all of that. Now I'm going to ask you to go ahead and pause, and we're going to take a quiz just to see if we understand about our approaches to problem solving. Let's learn the 7-step problem-solving model. So these 7 steps are in order for a reason. We do one step and then we do the next one, and there are 7 of them, and we're going to memorize them. I have found that with adult learning, if you can do kinetic memorization, it's really helpful. So why memorize it? Well, when you're having a problem, the last thing you want to do is go look up your notes. So this is a real easy way to remember the steps so that you can just get to solving the problem. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to do a hand motion and say the name of the step, and then you'll do the hand motion and say the name of the step, and the hand motion will help you remember the name of the step. So here we go. Step 1 is problem identification, and we're going to call it problem ID. This is where you take a look at the problem, you see who's involved, what's going on, where is it happening, and so forth. So you dive right in. It's problem ID. That's the first one. The second step is you reframe the problem into the form of a goal-oriented question. So I'm thinking like a picture frame. Okay, so the first step is problem ID. Second step, reframe. Then after we reframe it, that tees us up to be able to do some brainstorming. So I'm picturing these thought bubbles of brainstorms. All right, so brainstorm. First step is problem ID. Then reframe. Then brainstorm. Okay, the next 3 steps are really easy. You choose 3 and you discuss the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, from the top. Problem ID, reframe, brainstorm, choose 3, advantages and disadvantages. All right, great. After that, we prepare and recommend. So we need to prepare and recommend. And I'm thinking prepare the dough to make the bread and then recommend your solution. Okay, so prepare and recommend. From the top, problem ID, reframe, brainstorm, choose 3, advantages, disadvantages, prepare, and recommend. We've only got one more step left. We're almost there. Then the last step is engage feedback. We want to get people's opinion on it. Find out if we've done a good job of solving the problem. So the last step is engage feedback. All right, the whole thing from the top. Problem ID, reframe, brainstorm, choose 3, advantages, disadvantages, prepare, recommend, and engage feedback. All right, here's the pop quiz. I'm going to do the hand motions. You say the name of the steps. Here we go. You got it. Give me a high five. Way to go. All right, very good. That was fun. But what's even more important is you've got it memorized. I'm going to challenge you to teach that to someone that you live with. All right, let's go into these steps one at a time. Step 1, problem ID. When we're identifying a problem and solving it on our own, these 7 steps are really great to use, and we can usually do step 1 pretty quickly on our own. When we have problems where other people are involved, it's really important to do this step together. So these are the questions that you need to ask to really understand what's going on when a problem exists. It's your classic who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then we take a reality check with real transparency and assess what's my role. So, first of all, without casting blame or accusing anyone of anything, who is involved in the problem and or affected? So my example of the training partner, let's walk through each one of these questions. Obviously for me, it was a problem for her, for my boss. But then if we drill down deeper, it's facilities problem, security at the hotel contact, the management, even the hotel client the night before us because we need to clear out the room the night before and maybe set up. Hotel's food and beverage and management is involved because they've got to set up for breakfast and lunch. The hotel AV manager and staff are involved. And in a lot of the locations that we did training, they had an external offsite AV rental company. And so it involved them as well. All right, so that answer is really the who. What? So when I come to my meeting, I know that there's a problem because the tables aren't set up the way we specified them. I have a particular setup that I like to have that sets everybody up to be comfortable for a full day of training. And what happens is when I show up in the morning, the tables aren't set up the way they should be. I don't have internet connection. The slides don't work. I have to reset up the screen because it's in the middle instead of on the side. The projector isn't in the right place. And then what happens is my participants start entering the room before I'm really ready. And then they make comments like, oh, looks like it's going to be a late start. Then they sit down and we're still trying to move stuff around. I have to ask them to get up. We're just going to move this. And anyway, then the client sees it's a problem and the AV staff gets upset because they have to come in. Food and beverage gets upset. So the whole thing just really falls apart in the morning. So when it's happening is in that morning. And then apparently it's also happening the night before because if we could get in and set up the night before, then it wouldn't be such a hassle in the morning. So where is it happening? It's happening at work in our own training rooms. It's happening off-site. Which hotels? Well, the Hilton, the Marriott, Red Lion, Radisson, Hyatt, Doubletree Convention Center, other client conference rooms. It's happening in different size rooms, large rooms, small rooms, long, wide, deep, L-shaped. Just wherever it is that we are, it seems to be a problem. Why is it happening? Okay, it's happening because expectations aren't clear. We're not all on the same page. Communication hasn't taken place. Maybe messages or directions that we gave weren't received. It might be happening because people just set up the room the way they think they should set it up rather than taking a look at the specifications. Or maybe the slide plot that we laid out for them, people didn't even look at it. So it seems like there's communication that's not taking place. So how's it happening? With so many people involved, verbal communication is kind of like playing telephone. You know, I give you the direction, then you give it to someone else, they give it to someone else. Then someone disagrees with the setup because of what they always do, and then they go back to what they normally do when they're not sure of what the instructions are. All right, so here's the big question. What's my role? All right, well, my role in it is that I don't have very clear, easy to understand processes in place. I don't have very clear instructions in place. And to be really transparent, I really didn't have any idea that it would take such a committee to get a room set up. So that's my fault, my bad. So what I have to do then is get all of these people together and talk about what we can do to agree on how we can set up the room, which actually takes place in step 2. All right, so now choose one of the problems that you wrote down earlier, one that you have control over, and then work through every one of these questions and take a deep dive. As you can tell, this isn't an activity that you want to hurry up through. It's one that you want to dive really deep into and really take it to the next level. In fact, at this point, if there are other people involved in your problem, you might want to reach out and say, hey, could we have a really quick meeting? I want to take a stab at overcoming this problem. So you might go ahead and take some time with a peer group also and help walk through these last steps. So where we're going in our next lesson is to reframe that problem and how to brainstorm that problem. So now go ahead and take time and really dive deep into your own problem, and I will see you next session. Thank you. In our last lesson, we learned the 7 steps. So let's review those really quickly. Problem identification, reframe, brainstorm, choose 3, advantages, disadvantages, prepare, recommend, and engage feedback. We talked about problem ID, and hopefully you had a chance to do that yourself, and now you've got a really good picture of what the problem is that you'd like to solve. Have you ever tried to lose weight, get in shape, maybe for health reasons, or you just want to look better in the latest fashion? I have, and I always ask myself, should I join a gym, a fitness club again? Spend a fortune watching the monthly fee go up in my bank account statement. Maybe I get a personal trainer. Someone told me one time if I paid more for my gym, I would go more. So I did. I didn't go. Then my doctor suggested that I eat less. He said, people in your age group don't need as much food as they did growing up. I'm like, well, that's helpful. Depressing, actually. I could spend a ton of time brainstorming all the possible diet solutions and then not sticking to any of them. So I decided to start at problem ID, who, what, when, where, why, how, and my role. In this lesson, we're going to take that problem statement and turn it into a goal. And then that goal will formulate a question that will launch you into a productive brainstorming activity. You learn how to do this individually, which sometimes goes faster, and then as a group. So when we come up with a reframed goal with a group, we need to make sure that everybody agrees with that goal. And this could be one of the most critical steps that we take. In fact, when we problem solve, this is the question or the step that we skip. And this is why the problems come up over and over again. If you get everybody on the same page, you're going to have a lot better opportunity in brainstorming to come up with a solution that works for everyone. All right, let's take a look at some of my examples here. So the first goal-oriented question that I came up with was around my problem of I'm so busy, I don't have time to eat, and then I choose food that is quick and convenient that's unhealthy. So notice I could have gone a lot of different directions on what the problem is there. I could have gone with I don't have enough time to go to the gym, or I don't have enough money to go to the gym, or enough money for a trainer. Instead, I went with what I knew, and that was that I wasn't eating right. So that's what the problem ended up being when I did problem ID. So now what would the goal be? And again, this is just me, right? It doesn't involve anyone else. I will eat healthy food and still have time to meet my commitments. So that's what I ended up with as my goal. So what you do then is put it in the form of a question that will tee up brainstorming. So this question that I came up with is, what strategies can I implement to ensure that I eat healthy and still have time to meet my important commitments? All right, so let's take a look at my goal on the room setup. So the problem ends up being that people don't understand how the room needs to be set up correctly. So the goal then that the entire group would need to agree with is the entire internal and external setup team is clear on setup and can implement without changing it at the last minute. So that's the goal. So the question to tee up brainstorming would be, what communication processes and procedures need to be in place to ensure that the room setup is correct every time? All right, here's another example for you. Here's another challenge I had. I had a cubicle mate in one of the places that I worked who was really loud. And every time I was on the phone with a client, she was just laughing and really loud. And at first I thought, maybe this problem was just me, but I talked with a colleague and they said, you know what, it's a problem for us too. This is a noisy office. So here's the problem. My cubicle worker talks and laughs loud, which is distracting when I'm trying to work, and often is a problem when I'm talking on the phone. Turns out others have the same issue. So I got a group of people together in the office and I said, what could be our goal? And we all decided that the goal was, I want us to be able to work comfortably without distracting each other and maintain a good working relationship, which was really important. So the question that teed up our brainstorming was this: what strategies can we implement to ensure that we can work effectively and harmoniously? So you're probably noticing a little pattern here with the question is, what strategies? I mean, you could start your question off with, what things can we do? Or how would it help if? As long as it's teeing up the question that really needs to be answered. Now, why is this so important? What if on that last one I had as my goal, what can I say to her to get her to shut up? Right? I actually did use that. I tried that on my own and I didn't come up with anything that would be appropriate. So it really forces you to narrow it down to, what is the real problem and what are some things we can do to solve it. We take it from being a problem to an opportunity to make things better, and that's why we call it reframe. Reframe it into a goal-oriented question. All right, it's your turn to apply this to your challenge or problem. If it's an individual challenge, go ahead and work through that yourself right now. And if it involves others, then I suggest you take it offline and have this conversation with everyone. So I hope that this was helpful with problem identification and reframe. In our next session, we will talk about brainstorming. See you then. Hello, and welcome back to session 2. Again, I'm Diane Davidson, and I wanted to share with you that I live in California, in Roseville, which is just outside the state capital of Sacramento. And I live with my dog, and she's so cute. I know, look at her. Yes, she's a very sweet miniature golden doodle, and we do almost everything together. Walks, grocery runs, and she even sits with me at work. We moved to a condo in Roseville from our house in Sacramento and didn't realize all the changes that we would experience as a result. One being that she no longer had a doggy door. She couldn't go outside whenever she wanted, as she had been trained. In our new condo, they had leash laws and a fine for not cleaning up after your pet. So Lonnie couldn't go outside by herself anymore. Thank goodness there were Fido house stations all around the property for moments requiring pickup, so that wasn't too much of a problem. But it was the late night and early morning moments when Lonnie needed real quick relief, and sometimes she had to go when I wasn't really ready to be seen in public. And after repeatedly bending over to put her leash on several times a day, my back really started to hurt. So the question was, how does Lonnie go out when she needs to urgently, make it less painful for me to put on her leash, and be ready at any time of the day or night without having to go outside? So Lonnie and her best friend Bing, my mom's cat, talked about the situation and brainstormed some ideas. So guess what his first suggestion was? Right, Bing suggested getting a litter box. We actually had to consider that idea just to keep him engaged in the process. Then he suggested, hey, why don't you move in with me? After all, Grandma has a big yard with no laws, and she drops more stuff when she's cooking. He also mentioned maybe not eating or drinking so much. After more brainstorming, they came up with a final recommendation. So instead of Lonnie barking and crying frantically, she would just stand by the door, make a little sound with her indoor voice, so I knew when she had to go out. Then, to help out with my back pain, she would jump up on a chair so I could put her leash on without having to bend over. Just a little training was required. Then they suggested that we buy a retractable leash so that she could go out and I could stay in and hide behind the door. She just had to be nice if neighbors came around the corner and startled her so she wouldn't start barking at them. Then she'd jump back up so I could take off the leash. And then with Lonnie doing most of the work, she wanted to know what was in it for her. So I agreed to give her a treat every time she kept up her end of the deal. Pun intended. She even got some new shades and a puppuccino for being such a cool dog. So as I shared that story, you probably recognize the first couple of steps of our 7-step model. And you also heard the rest of the steps too. So in this session, we will explore the next 4 steps. So let's review all the steps now. Do you remember your kinetic? All right, here we go. The first one is problem ID. The second step is reframe it into the form of a goal-oriented question. The steps we'll cover today are brainstorm, choose 3, advantages and disadvantages. And then after that, we prepare and recommend our recommendation, and then we engage feedback. So that's what we have in store today. There are 2 kinds of brainstorming, individual and group brainstorming. When I worked to resolve my situation with Lonnie, my dog, truth be told, I used individual brainstorming. Bing wasn't helpful at all. We brainstorm on our own every day. When you brainstorm on your own, you don't have to worry about other people's egos or opinions, and you can be freer and more creative. For example, you might find that an idea that you'd hesitate to bring up in a group develops into something special when you explore it on your own. However, you may not develop ideas as fully when you're on your own because you don't have the wider experience of the other group members to draw on. With group brainstorming, you can take advantage of the full experience and creativity of all team members. When one member gets stuck with an idea, another member's creativity and experience can take that idea to the next stage. You can develop ideas in greater depth with group brainstorming than you can with individual brainstorming. Another advantage of group brainstorming is that it helps everyone feel that they've contributed to the solution, and it reminds people that others have creative ideas to offer. It's also fun, so it can be great for team building. Group brainstorming can be risky for individuals, though. Unusual suggestions may appear to lack value at first sight. This is where you need to carefully and respectfully facilitate sessions so that the group doesn't crush those ideas and stifle creativity. Where possible, participants should come from a wide range of disciplines. This cross-section of experience can make the session more creative. However, don't make the group too big, as groups of 5 to 7 people seem to be most effective. While group brainstorming is often more effective at generating ideas than normal group problem solving, several studies have shown that individual brainstorming produces more often better ideas than group brainstorming. This can occur because groups aren't always strict in following the rules of brainstorming, and bad behaviors start to creep in. Mostly, though, this happens because people pay so much attention to other people that they don't generate ideas of their own, and they forget these ideas when they're waiting for their turn to speak. This is called blocking. Individual brainstorming is most effective when you need to solve a simple problem, generate a list of ideas, or focus on a broad issue. Group brainstorming is often more effective for solving complex problems that need the whole group's buy-in. Let's learn a technique that combines individual brainstorming into a group brainstorming activity. This is a really great approach when blocking occurs. On a piece of paper, each person writes down their own reframed problem at the top of the page. This is the question that you created in step 2 to launch brainstorming. So for example, my reframed goal-oriented question is, what strategies can I implement to ensure that I eat healthy and still have time to meet my important commitments? So then you pass the paper to the right, and the person next to you can write down an idea to solve your problem. Don't just write down the same thing over and over again. Offer a different solution. Then pass it again until everyone on your team or in your meeting has an opportunity to write down an idea. When you get back your sheet of paper, read the ideas already presented and come up with something different or add to one that's already there. In this way, all ideas are considered, even from people who may have withheld their idea if it were being shared with everyone. Here are some ideas that will help you facilitate an effective brainstorming session in a group. Why do you think a comfortable meeting environment is key to effective brainstorming? It sets the stage for critical thinking and provides an open platform for creativity. What are some of the comfortable environments that you can use at work? Do you have a meeting room, a conference room, or a large office? Maybe you would consider taking the meeting off-site to a conference center, maybe a private room in your favorite restaurant. You could even take it outdoors with flip charts and Post-its of many colors and sizes and easels. Right now, my favorite online platform is Jamboard. It's the remote way to brainstorm with Post-its. You could use a Zoom whiteboard or anything like that. What does comfortable mean to you? Open, light, cozy, dark, standing up, sitting down, at a table, by a window, in a beanbag chair? You get the idea. Whatever works for your culture. Post-its work better than an appointed scribe because it keeps the flow of ideas moving. The most important rule about group brainstorming is to brainstorm non-judgmentally. Why do you think that is? Well, if you say that won't work, or we tried that already, or no way, or we don't have that kind of budget, it just shuts down the flow of ideas. People feel invalidated, and they won't speak up anymore in fear of appearing foolish or incompetent. Even if an idea is ridiculous, outlandish, or flat out impossible due to any reason, let it flow, put it up. The thing is, that idea could spawn a real workable solution in the end. Now, what about if someone has a good idea? Really? Don't say, hey man, that's a great idea. Seriously, why not? It's hard to not say that's a great idea. The reason we don't say it is as soon as you say it's a great idea, there's a real pull to stop the brainstorming process and go with that idea. In the moment, it might feel like you're saving time, but in the end, it may not be that long-term solution. Resist the pull to judge. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. It keeps the flow of critical thinking going. So to summarize, brainstorm non-judgmentally because some of the best ideas come from the ones that are the most ridiculous. Because even a bad idea can launch the thought process for something that's good. It's better to have crazy, unrealistic, fun, outlandish ideas than none at all. Then you can pull back later and mold it into something that works. You often get the best results of group brainstorming by managing the process according to these guidelines. By doing this, you can get people to focus on the issue without interruption. You can maximize the number of ideas that you generate, and you get that great feeling of team bonding that comes with a well-run brainstorming session. After all your ideas are on the table or the wall or in Jamboard, begin to group the ideas together into similar ideas. Have everyone involved in the grouping. Make sure it's not left up to one or even just a few individuals. Why do you think that's important? Well, it's important for buy-in and engagement. When grouping those ideas together, take your time as a group and focus on one conversation at a time. It's easy for small groups to have side conversations and start deciding things in subgroups. Really try to avoid that. You might even appoint someone to keep the group focused. You really want to keep everyone on the same page. Once you group the ideas, you'll start to formulate your solution. Here's a graphic to show how your mind map approach helps you categorize and wrap up your brainstorming session. Now we're ready for step 4. So let's review our first steps and pick it up from where we left off. 1, problem identification. Reframe. Brainstorm. We are now at choose 3 and advantages and disadvantages. So I was working with a group that had come up with only one solution during their brainstorming session, and they were really excited about it. They told me they didn't need to come up with 3 solutions, that they had worked it out as a group and they were ready to implement their idea. Their enthusiasm was really compelling, and I could tell they were quite happy with just their ability to work together and come up with consensus on a solution. I must admit, it was quite a Herculean feat, and I was starting to cave in a bit on coaching them to really be ready with 3 ideas. They really wanted to skip this step of choosing 3, and I was starting to bend. We started the advantages and disadvantages step instead of pressing for 3 ideas, and this is kind of how it went. As I was coaching them, I said, all right, well, what is your budget for this plan? They were, oh, budget? Wow, we didn't even think about a budget. That's okay, well, who would be able to approve this budget? Well, our boss would. Good, what's the probability that she will approve it? 100%? They were like, no. Okay. Is there anyone that this idea impacts that wasn't here today during your brainstorming session or for your reframing for that matter? Yeah. Who? Well, a bunch of people, actually several departments. I said, okay. Well, what pushback do you think those people will have? Do you think they'll buy into this idea? And they said, no, actually most of them won't. So after a few moments of silence, they said, maybe we should invite others and do this brainstorming again, or actually start from the top and maybe come up with more detailed around the problem ID, might even come up with a different reframed question if we think about all those involved. And I said, I love that idea. Good work. So in this module, you'll be able to start thinking more critically and strategically in order to play out possible advantages and disadvantages to your solutions. It will open your mind to the many potential barriers that could sabotage your great solutions. In this step, you'll also discover that sometimes, if the first 2 steps have not been seriously considered by all the right people, you might need to revisit them. And that's okay. That's high-level problem solving. Remember, we don't want to temporarily do a quick fix only to have the problem come up all over again. We want to consider everything and solve them once and for all. Step 5, advantages and disadvantages. This is very close to being ready to go at this point. You've identified the problem with who, what, when, where, how, why, and what your role in it is. You've reframed the problem into a goal-oriented question to tee up brainstorming. After brainstorming individually and or as a group, you've started to group your ideas together and have some really great viable combined ideas. The 3 solutions are starting to become pretty obvious, and now we're ready to outline advantages and disadvantages of each. Now is when we're getting real with the possibility of success or failure. Are we going to cure this for long-term results or just fix them temporarily? Be honest. Discuss the real potential outcomes of each one of your solutions. Talk about who will support each one and why or why not. After you weigh the advantages and disadvantages of each, come up with a viable solution that will ensure long-term results and accountability. One of the things that can be really helpful is to picture yourself communicating these ideas and what do you think people's responses will be? How might this idea play out? What could possibly happen, both positive and negative? What pushback will there be? What potential subsequent problems might exist? Will this solution have any barriers as far as logistics or budget? Will leadership buy in? Is it practical? Are there any communication challenges involved in rolling out this solution? Other considerations might be around culture, rules, regulations, processes, procedures, human resistance to change, etc. So let's take, for example, right now we're living in COVID times at the time of this recording. And one of the challenges that we're facing is how are we going to get back to work? So let's say we've gone through the whole process and now we're down to discussing the advantages and disadvantages of a few solutions. So here's what that might look like. We've decided to install infrared lights to clean the workplace. All right, the advantage of that is that it reduces cleaning time and it reduces the manpower involved with cleaning, which then reduces our costs. The only thing is, or the disadvantages, is that it is expensive to install and it may not really work. Not enough tests have actually been done to help us be confident, or others that would approve this be confident that it actually works, which in turn might prevent people from wanting to come to work because they're not so sure about the red lights. Here's a second solution. Have each person clean before and after work with bleach wipes. So the advantage is, wow, Clorox wipes are not so expensive and everybody would be involved in responsibility for keeping everything clean. The disadvantage is that accountability may be an issue. Not everybody would participate. It's possible that someone might miss a spot because they're just not that thorough. Or possibly there could be a problem with just disposing of all the cleaning supplies. That could be quite cumbersome. All right, solution 3. Stay home and schedule work in shifts so that less people are coming to work on a daily basis. And then hire a cleaning service. So the advantage would be people would like to work from home. We could get a smaller building and reduce expenses in real estate. The disadvantage is that the cleaning service costs might go up. We have a lease commitment if we needed to get out of some of our space, and moving would really be hard to do. So you get the idea. There can be a real pull to gloss over this step. We have a tendency to want to be super optimistic here, but what we really need to do is to critically think about what will work and what won't. Ask those hard questions. Will people buy into your idea? And what pushback will they have? This is not to say that there's a perfect solution that will not get any pushback, but it prepares you to be in a position to share your plan for overcoming those barriers in your recommendation. And that's where our focus will be in the next session. We're going to cover our last 2 steps of prepare and recommend and engaging feedback. I look forward to seeing you then. Hi, I'm Diane Davidson, and I'm excited today to continue our process of problem solving. So let's just review what we've covered so far. First of all, we've got our kinetics, so let's go ahead and review that now and see if we still remember all 7 steps. Problem identification, reframe, brainstorm, choose 3, advantages and disadvantages, prepare and recommend, and engage feedback. So today we're going to talk about prepare and recommend and engage feedback. Remember my enthusiastic problem-solving group that wanted to skip choose 3? They went back to Jamboard, did some more brainstorming, and came up with 3 different viable solutions. And finally, they were ready to make a recommendation. They thought that this particular recommendation was going to be really favorable, and they actually wanted to skip the prepare and recommendation step. So they were really eager to go to the boss with the solution. Now, let's be honest, it would be nice to go to the boss at this point and get some kudos for our work, but what do you think the boss would ask? Right, how long will that take? How's that going to work? How much will it cost? Who's going to lead that project? Blah, blah, blah. So let's skip all that drama and be prepared to make a well thought out recommendation. In this lesson, you will learn the common questions you need to ask in order to prepare a robust recommendation. This extra step will show your critical thinking skills, reveal your extraordinary initiative, and will exponentially increase the odds of getting approval. Now that you have 3 viable solutions ready in case your rationale is questioned, make a recommendation on the best solution. When you recommend, be ready to prepare the answers to these questions. So the questions are, what is your plan and timeline to execute on the recommendation? What resources are needed to implement? What potential questions might the decision maker have? And how will you ask for approval? So how will being prepared with these questions help you get your idea approved? Well, it will show the decision maker or people whom the decision will impact how well you have thought this through, and hopefully they'll be more appreciative of your critical thinking efforts to solve the problem. So I'd like to give you an example. So the example I'd like to use is with that noisy cubicle mate that I had. Remember, I told you that she was making a lot of noise, and when I talked on the phone, it was really distracting, and people that I was even talking to could hear her laughing in the background. So after we brainstormed, we came up with a few solutions, and the one that we wanted to recommend was to install a white noise system into our department. And that had been shown in call centers to really reduce noise and create a sound barrier in between cubicles. So let's walk through these questions one at a time, and I'll share with you how we process that. So what's your plan and timeline to execute on the recommendation? Our plan is to immediately install a white noise system that we actually found on the internet. So then it says, what resources are needed to implement? Well, the resource that we need is to purchase this particular white noise system. We also need the resource of our AV department to come in and install it. But besides that, we didn't really need any other resources. And then what potential questions might the decision maker have? Well, one thing they would want to know for sure is how much was this going to cost? So what we recommended is that we purchase this system that we found online that was actually a used system that had been refurbished, and we were going to get it for half the price. And then how will we ask for approval? We're actually wanting our leader to think about it and get back with us in 7 days. Now that we've prepared our recommendation, we're ready to make the recommendation. So the process is pretty simple. You explain what you've just been through. State the problem, recommend your solution, present your rationale, including the advantages and benefits, communicate your plan and timeline, ask if there are any questions or comments, and then request approval to proceed. So let me give you an example of what that would sound like with my cubicle issue. Hi, thanks for meeting with me today. I wanted to share with you a challenge that we have found in the department, and that is that it's noisy, and we're all on phones and we're coaching people on the phone. And when one conversation gets loud in the neighbor's cubicle, it interrupts other people's conversations. So we're trying to look at a way to have more silence, more privacy, so that we can have some really great conversations with our clients without being distracted. We looked at a lot of different solutions, and the one that we came up with that we thought was best was to install a white noise system in our whole department. So what happens is the white noise creates this, if you will, padding of sound, and it actually reduces other noises that are coming from around other parts of the department. So the reason we chose this is because it's going to reduce that noise for everybody in the whole department. And we didn't really see any disadvantages because it was going to create a nice culture for us. So our plan is we've already figured out who we'd like to purchase the system from and who we would have it installed by, and we'd like to get going right away. So do you have any questions? Oh yeah, the cost. All right, usually a white noise system for our department, the dimensions and the amount of white noise that we need to be effective would cost about $14,000. We found one online though that's a used system that's been refurbished, and we're able to get that for $4,000. Who's going to install it? That's a really good question. We contacted our AV department that we use for some of our presentations that we do, and it turns out they know how to install the system. In fact, Justin knows how to install it and is going to come in and do that for us at no charge. Any other questions? Okay, so we'd like for you to think about that, and 7 days would be great because Justin's schedule opens up in 7 days, and he'd be able to come over and install it immediately. All right, thank you. Let me know what you think. We've made our recommendation, and we're hoping for a big thumbs up, but it's possible that the decision maker will be surprised with your new approach, especially if this is the first time you've brought a problem to light with this model. Could the decision maker have resistance based on past problems that you brought up? Sure, because you didn't come with solutions before. Is it possible that the decision maker might be surprised with your new approach? Absolutely. Because they're used to only hearing complaints and it's not my job or it's not my problem. Is it possible that the solution you came up with is not necessarily the same as what the decision maker would have normally recommended? For sure. And that's why you need to be fully ready to discuss your new approach. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how we can overcome potential reactivity by identifying our individual triggers. We know ourselves better than anyone, and we know how we might respond negatively if we're shut down, especially if we have put this much thought and time and attention into solving the problem. Let's face it, at this point, this is our baby, and we're proud of our work. We're excited to share and can't come up with any reason someone wouldn't agree with us. We've done the critical thinking, we've looked at this from every angle, and we know our idea will work. If we shut down, that could be a trigger. I'm just saying, a reactive response could diminish future attempts, so we need to be open to feedback. Let's take a look at some of the things that we might want to consider and be honest about our potential responses. I like to look at this as be and avoid. So what do we need to be to come across well, and what do we need to really avoid? So let's read through these and highlight the characteristics that would be most difficult for you. I'm going to share with you the ones that would be most difficult for me to display, and then after that, you're going to pause and write down and think through what would be some of the things that might cause you to be defensive. All right, when we're making the recommendation, we want to be confident. We don't want to come across as, I think this will work, so we don't show any kind of in-confidence there at all. We come in, we've thought this through, we're not being forceful, but we're confident with our idea. We want to be calm and collected. So that means not to be too excited. We want to be open-minded. Even though we've thought this through, If the person we're sharing it with has something else in mind, we want to express that we're very open to that. We want to be organized with our thought process and the way we present it. We want to be composed, respectful, and most importantly, ready for a yes or a no. So on the other side of that, what are some of the things we want to avoid? We want to avoid being defensive. After we've put so much thought and time into this and we share our idea, if someone says, oh, that'll never work, it'd be really hard not to just go, oh, what? We don't want to show strong emotions, like immediately just say, well, why not? We don't want to be pushy and say, hey, listen, I've really thought this through and this is the way that we should go. We also don't want to be threatening or catastrophizing or aggrandizing or embellishing, making the situation seem worse than it is. Now, you might say, oh, I don't think I'd ever be threatening. But think about it. If you've thought through this and you really have a great reaction, let's say like with the white noise, for example, and then the person says, white noise? Why did you think of that? That's not going to do anything. It would be really hard to just sit there and say, all right, well, tell me more what you're thinking. Or they might say, we're in a cubicle environment. You guys just need to get used to it. And then we might threaten and say something like, well, we're not going to be able to deliver on very good service, right? So we don't want to go there. We need to really be composed and respectful, and most importantly, ready for a yes or no. So now be honest with yourself. Go ahead and identify the ones that you think you might have a potential to be that you want to avoid. And what would be some of the things that you may not do that you want to make sure that you show up? Do you want to show up confident, organized, and composed? So go ahead and write that down. And now we've come to our last step. Engage feedback. If someone comes to you with a solution to a problem, you have some decisions to make. Now that you know that problem solving is a process that takes time and critical thinking, it would be nice if you supported others as well. So if you're going to say yes to a solution, a nice way to encourage the person to continue to problem solve would be to choose from these responses. If you're going to say yes, you can just say, yes, I like it as is. It looks great. Or you could say yes by saying, that's a great idea. Could we just make these changes? Or, I love that idea. So I'd like to get a little bit more details on it though. What caused you to go in that direction? So you're asking for the rationale. Encourage future behavior by saying, wow, that's an awesome idea. I really look forward to your suggestions in the future. Or you might even say, oh, that sounds great. Great idea. How did you think about that white noise? Or you just simply say thank you. Now, if the idea is one that you don't agree with and you don't think it'll fly, instead of just saying no because we understand that that can trigger someone to be defensive, we want to also facilitate problem solving with that person. So instead of just saying no, say, all right, well, that's interesting. Tell me how you got to that solution, or ask for the rationale. Or you might say, that's really an interesting idea. Some other information that I think we should take a look at before we make our final decision is, or you ask for what other solutions were discussed. Okay, so white noise. Well, what other ideas did you have? Well, we thought about building walls and creating offices for everyone. We also thought about maybe renting a conference room where each one of us could go when we needed to have a really quiet conversation. But we realized that white noise would actually solve it for everybody. All right. You could also say no by recommending that others should be included on the decision. So you might say, all right, well, who all did you talk to before you came to that decision? You might want to check with Joe and Susie before you go with that final decision, and then come back to me and let me know what you decide. Or you might provide overlooked information or perspective to help develop another solution. Like the person might say, we actually just got a budget for another suite in our building, and we were thinking about spacing out the cubicles a little bit more. Maybe something like that might help solve that problem. So when we're preparing and recommending our solution, it's also nice to consider that if we get a yes, then that's great. And if we get questions around what we could do to look into it further, it's not a definite no. It could actually be a maybe. All right. Well, thank you so very much for taking this course on problem solving. And I'd kind of like to wrap it up with this. I have one last problem that I need to solve. My problem is that this card is too small for me to put my head through it. What I want to do, I've seen someone do it before, is they cut a hole in it big enough and then they put their head through it. So I'd like to be able to do that. So I'm going to go and do what I usually do and just kind of wing it and see if I can't figure this out. Let me see if I can do that. Here's what I usually do when I solve problems. I just jump right in and start trying things. It's a hit and miss, but sometimes I can solve the problem maybe with my first idea, like this one. All right, let's see if it works. No, I can't put my head through that. All right, so you know what I'm going to do instead? I'm going to try using the skills that I learned in this course. So I'm going to state the problem, identify the problem. I can't figure out how to cut a hole big enough for me to put my head through this card. So I want to be able to do it as a magic trick at the end of all my sessions. So that's the problem. So I'm going to reframe it with a goal-oriented question. What cutting process do I need to use to cut a hole big enough for me to put my head through this card? Then I'll do some brainstorming. I'm going to make sure that I'm non-judgmental as I'm doing that brainstorming. And when I'm brainstorming, I'm going to make sure that we have a little control over the conversation, that we're in a really cool environment. So we'll just allow that brainstorming to happen. And then I'm going to organize those ideas a little bit and narrow it down to 3 really great ideas. And after I choose 3, I'm going to weigh out the advantages and disadvantages of each one of those ideas. And then I'm going to prepare my solution so that I can make the recommendation. And when I prepare, I'm going to state what the problem is and share my rationale. Then after that, when I make my recommendation, I'll be calm and cool and collected and try not to be too defensive or threatening when there might be resistance to my plan. Then I'm going to be open to feedback to set me up for success. So let's see if it works. Yay! I can put my head through it. Ta-da! Well, thank you so much for spending time with me over these last few lessons. It was a real pleasure and an honor to work with you. Keep learning, keep improving, and keep using your 7 steps to solve problems. I believe in you, and I wish you all the success in the world. Until we meet again, goodbye.